On this episode of Curve Ahead, I'm joined by Chris Vasquez, the Chief Product Officer of AWeber, an industry leader in email marketing and automation trusted by small businesses around the world. Chris shares his journey where he found his love for UI and designing intuitive tools to empower non technical users to consistently connect with their audience. In this episode, we dig into why simplicity is key when designing products for beginners and how AWeber's new AI-powered newsletter assistant can help users go from overwhelmed to sending in less than 8 minutes, and how email is still the most reliable relationship building channel, especially in a world where algorithms can cut you off from your audience at any moment. If you've been struggling to hit send or keep up with your newsletter goals, this episode is packed with insights on how to show up consistently and why automation and authenticity is the winning combo. Hey, Chris, welcome to the podcast. Do you mind introducing yourself?
Of course. Thanks so much for having me. I'm Chris Vasquez. I'm the Chief Product Officer at AWeber, which means that I get to work with a talented team of product managers and user interface and user experience designers to make sure that we understand what our customers' problems are and that we're building useful and usable solutions to those problems. And it's a freaking blast, man.
Tell me about your background and how that led you to AWeber.
That is a winding story. So when I was young, I had basically every job you can imagine, from landscaping to masonry laborer to being a waiter, all sorts of things. And then I started a design and development agency with a few friends. So my background is in design. I did that for a few years, really passionate about UI design over the course of that span. That was 20 something years ago, and moved from there into a startup where we were building a tool that connected big brands, Fortune 500 brands, to video creators. And that was really exciting as well. It was a whole different set of challenges where these very sophisticated folks at the big brands needed to be able to do work with less sophisticated when it came to advertising, but really creative, talented people on the creator side. And bridging that gap was one of the most challenging parts of my professional career. But we produced multiple Super Bowl spots, lots of national TV spots. It was really incredible. But the strange thing throughout all of that is whenever I would talk to big brand managers at these huge companies and talk about like what their goals were, where they wanted to do audience capture, like get people into their community, it always kept coming back to email. And at the time I was like young and foolish and I was like, email, who uses email? But through that process, I learned everyone uses email. And if you want to actually develop a relationship with a prospect and turn them into a customer, email is one of the most effective ways to do that. So that led me to AWeber. AWeber is an email marketing company. We offer lots of other complementary tools, but our core service is email marketing. And that's how I ended up where I am. And it's still, 10 years, I joined about 10 years ago, 10 years of learning about email marketing. I'm still surprised at how helpful it is for small businesses specifically.
Yeah. So can we dive into email for a second? I think that people don't necessarily understand there's different types of email. So can you just touch on those individual types real quick and kind of tell us where AWeber fits into that?
Yes. Okay. So first, the thing that we are not is we're not an inbox provider. So somebody like Gmail or Office 365 or Live.com or Yahoo.com, those are folks where you have an email address, and it's primarily used in those inbox providers for sending one-to-one emails or emails to small groups of people. What we are an email marketing platform where you can send either emails to large groups of people. We work really hard to maintain our reputation between AWeber and the inbox providers like Gmail, so they trust the mail that's coming from us. And you can send automated emails when people perform an action. So when someone joins your email list, we let you send automated follow-up messages to them to welcome them to your service, onboard them, present offers automatically. You can also trigger those automations based on behaviors. So if somebody visits a specific page on your website, or if they sign up on a specific form or select a specific field when they're signing up. So that's the big difference between the inbox providers and an email marketing platform like AWeber.
I think that a lot of people don't necessarily understand the complexities involved with email, right? Like email, it seems like such a simple technology because it's been around for, I don't know, 30, 40 years at this point in time. And I think that people don't necessarily take into consideration when it comes to like a very well curated email, like all the work that actually goes into creating the assets to put in the email to make sure that it looks great, that it's not just like a white background and black font.
Oh, yeah. So there are actually a couple. Let me comment on how special email is. That sounds like such a nerdy thing to say, but man, I feel it so much. The thing that makes email so special first is when I sign up for your list, Brian, like you and I own that relationship with each other, with nobody in the middle who can at any point like sever us. Like if you want to email me, you have my email address and I have yours, so we can actually converse. And the big difference between that and like a social tool is that you don't own your audience. So my wife is an interior designer and she has this massive following on Instagram. And one of the things that is just like a constant worry there is she doesn't own that relationship. It looks like she does, but at any point in time, Instagram Meta could say, no, you can't talk to these people anymore. They can't see your content anymore. And they do that in a variety of ways. One of the big things is through their algorithms only showing your content to a relatively small percentage of your audience unless you pay to boost it or promote it. Like that just doesn't exist in email. As long as you're sending quality messages that your audience actually wants, and as long as they actually opted into it, they're going to get those emails, and you're going to maintain that relationship. But going on to your next point about what makes a well-crafted email, sometimes, in some cases, it can just be something that looks like it was created in an inbox provider, like in your Gmail, where it just looks like black text and blue links. And that works really well in some of those automated use cases I was mentioning, where somebody signs up for your list and you want to send them something that sounds or feels really personal. But if you're trying to sell a product, there is nothing quite like the ability to send a really well-designed flyer into somebody's inbox. I'm a big fan of glasses and sunglasses, and I can't tell you how many times I've bought a pair of glasses because I got an email and it was like, wow, this looks awesome. Summer is here. They've really sold me on the vision of it. And a lot of work goes into that because it's different than designing for the web. Because if you open a website in Chrome versus Safari or even Opera, odds are that it's going to render very similarly. It's going to look very similar depending on where you open it. But in email, there's such big differences between some email clients. Outlook is the big offender here. That they just can't render the same across all the clients. So you need to make sure that you're making decisions. So if something can't render, it falls back appropriately. And that's one of the big benefits, like an email marketing platform like AWeber, is we try and do as much of that thinking for you so you don't accidentally make rendering mistakes. I don't know if that actually spoke to your question, but...
No, I mean, I think that it does, right? It goes into complexities that people don't necessarily think about.
Yeah.
Like I remember when I was working in email, the iPhone 15 had just come out and we were having issues with email appearance when it's rendered in dark mode. Right? Like, so there's so many like little nuances that people don't necessarily understand based off of their personal preferences that people like yourself at AWeber take into consideration to ensure that your user experience is optimized as best as it can be.
Yes, that dark mode, like that just gave me a twinge of panic, because the big thing that you see, or that we'll see sometimes, is if your logo is black or close to black, and it's on a transparent background, when it renders in dark mode, it'll be invisible in many cases. Yeah, it's interesting. But there's this funny thing where like there are two ways that we as a platform can try and deal with something like that. We can either give people options to control like how their email renders in different cases, or we can make decisions based on what we think of as best practices and our expert knowledge of what is going to happen in different situations. And that is such a huge balancing act whenever we're designing interfaces. Because there's this thing in UI design called the paradox of choice, which basically says the more choice you give users, the more likely they are to end up with something that they're less satisfied with. So finding that balance of like, what is the right amount of choice that we can give people so they feel like what they've made is something they're proud of and attached to, without giving them so much choice that they either become paralyzed and can't make a decision and don't use the product, or they end up making errors. So in dealing with a dark mode, for example, like I could imagine a really complex situation where you give people the ability to matte an image on a solid color. But I could also imagine somebody messing that up pretty easily. And it makes me more think that something that would be a better solution in that case would be to either automatically matte a transparent image on whatever the background color is, or to just warn the user and let them know so they can make a change outside of your product.
I think that this goes really well into my next question with what some of the challenges do you face balancing simplicity with functionality, especially when building tools for people who may be beginners or don't have a ton of time to like really deep dive into something like developing email?
Yeah, and I think here that is a fantastic question. And in the past, I think we've erred too far on, like in past years, on the side of choice. Because like our thought at the time was, well, if we give people the ability to do whatever they want, then we're never going to get in their way. But what we've seen is when you do that, and this wasn't just at AWeber, but at previous companies as well, especially when it comes to beginners, you just stop them in place because they don't even know where to start. So our philosophy now is, how do we focus on task completion for the most important task and give people the tools to allow them to complete the most important task and try and remove any other options until we find that it's blocking someone from accomplishing an important task. And I'll give an example of this. We've been working on this agentic newsletter creation tool, which is really cool, but it has a number of challenges. One is, how much control do you put in front of the user at the first step? Because like in this case, we need the agent to understand their tone of voice. We need it to understand the types of content that they send, and we need it to understand the type of email they want to write at a specific point in time. So we could put all of this stuff out in front of them, a full settings page where they tell us what their tone is, et cetera, et cetera. But instead what we did is we built a tool that tries to interpret that from their website. And we fill in a settings page for them with what we interpreted from their website. So all they're presented with is a box to write in a prompt for the specific newsletter they want, or we give them a list of suggested topics, again, based on their website, and then a pathway to the settings page if they want to fiddle with things and go deeper. And what we found is that most folks don't fiddle with things. Most folks, we've done a good enough job filling in their tone, understanding their products, that they're willing to do the simple action of writing a prompt or selecting a topic and are actually using the product. But that was an example of a place where I could see a time 4 or 5 years ago where we might have done that much heavier interface. But the lesson we've learned is focus on the most important task and don't clutter up the interface with other settings that only power users might want.
I think that that's just a good lesson for business, period, right? Like I use a different platform when it comes to creating newsletters, and I haven't actually gotten one out the door because I am just overwhelmed with the number of questions or prompts or this, that, and the other thing, the options that I have. The other thing is like when you were talking about like, don't give too many choices. I feel as though I hate my website, my company's website, because I have too many choices when it comes to like the actual UI development. I see something that I love and I'm like, oh man, that is so slick. I want to replicate something like that. And then I start down that path and I'm like, okay, well, it doesn't look like how it did here. And now I am stuck somewhere in between and I still hate it.
Yeah. Yeah, I know that same feeling, man. Like as a side business, I make pickleball paddles. I love pickleball so much. And I've always wanted to make like a physical product. So I make these pickleball paddles. And I had built a list of a couple hundred prospects, but just through organic sharing content and stuff like that. And I had them on my list for like 6 months. And you know how many emails I sent them? 0. And I work in email. It's like, what the heck is wrong with me? But it was because, in my case, of a feeling of like, I don't know where to start. And that's where like, or not even I don't know where to start. It's like a lack of confidence in that case. Because it's like my core competency isn't building pickleball paddles. It's a thing I'm trying to start. So I don't want to do something silly. And that's actually something that the assistant we've been working on actually helped me with. Is it writes the first draft, and so it does all of the, it knows about my products, it includes a promotion for my product. All it asked me is like, is there a story you want to include? And I told it a story about how much fun it is to play in the winter in the Northeast, because you're out with a really dedicated, when you play outside, you're out with a really dedicated group of people. And it turned it into something so wonderful that I was able to say, like, okay, I'm just going to send it. It might not be exactly what I would have written, but I didn't write it. Like, when I had the chance, I didn't write it. So this, like, focusing in on asking me a simple question, giving me a clear result, and giving me one action, like, do you want to send it, is something that really makes me confident that this is the right path to take when you're building interfaces.
So let me ask you a question there. Since we're talking about AI and AI tech,
Yeah.
do you think that that is the path forward for people? Like, if there's a gap in just getting started, whether it's knowledge, this thing, that thing, or the otherwise, do you think technology is going to fill that gap, or should it continue to be education? Or is it a mixture of both?
I think it's a mixture of both. So we follow this principle of AI design called human in the loop. And what that means is, like, when you get to a decision point where there's a chance for what the AI model thinks is right to be different from what you as a human think is right, then it involves the human. So in our case, our agent never sends an email without first presenting it to you and you having to be the person who pushes the button saying, send this email. Because I think these tools are really wonderful, but I'm not one of these people who believes that they're going to replace the things that make us special as people. The ability to tell stories, the ability to have truly novel thought, the ability to connect with other people as people. But I do think what they can do is take away a lot of the tedium. So having to go and get a link to my pickleball paddle every time is not something that is like innately human. A human doesn't have to do that. A machine could. So instead, it should automatically add an image and a sales promotional block about one of my pickleball paddles and let me conversationally say, oh, well, switch it to this other paddle, and it should be able to go out and get it. So I kind of think it's a combination of things. I will say I had all the education in the world around, like, why I should send this newsletter. I send tons of newsletters to millions of subscribers over the course of the years, and I didn't do it for myself because that hurdle of not feeling confident enough to put pen to paper, keyboard to paper, was what was actually blocking me. And the fact that this thing gave me a first draft was what I needed. And I think it's what a lot of people need to be consistent. You can still change it however you like, but starting from somewhere that's specific to you and your products or services, as opposed to starting with a blank page or even a template full of generic information, was for me, and it seems to be for our couple thousand of initial beta users of this feature, it seems to be a really different experience.
Yeah, I mean, I remember. So a little bit about me, like, I started creating content about a year ago with just kind of documenting my process of being an entrepreneur, kind of the daily struggles, the good, the bad, the ugly, the things that any entrepreneur kind of goes through. And those first couple of sessions where I sat down to have a conversation with a camera, like, was so challenging because, like, it makes you feel vulnerable. And I think that this is the same thing, is it helps kind of get you past that initial step of vulnerability to, like, actually having something tangible and be like, oh, wow, this is actually really great. This is kind of on key with where I want to go with this. So it eliminates that first step. And I think that that's where so many people get hung up, especially when it comes to starting a business or starting anything new, is just that feeling of, like, vulnerability and exposure on not knowing how it's going to be perceived by other people.
That is a great point. Brian, can I ask you, like, how did you get past those first couple sessions? Like, what helped you actually do it?
Reps. Honestly, it wasn't necessarily the fact that, like, I felt like I was talking to somebody. I was creating something for myself, right? I was creating a personal journal. Like, I had seen so many people be entrepreneurs and then, like, man, I really wish I would have started documenting my journey a long time ago. And I was like, well, I've got an opportunity right now to start that. Yeah. And, like, looking back at the videos, they were super cringy. And, like, it was really hard for me to listen to my own voice when doing any of the editing. But, like, those things got much easier and I got more natural in front of the camera. And it was just putting in the time, putting in the reps, and not necessarily thinking of all the people who are going to see it, but more like one or two people that I really want to pick up on the message of what it is that I'm trying to do.
How did you keep yourself accountable? That's like one of the big things for me.
Yeah, accountability is hard, right? And I think with being an entrepreneur, that's probably one of the biggest daily struggles, especially early on if you don't have a team that supports you, is that like, for me, I had the realization I was a couple of months into my journey and I had got a cold. It was like in the summer and I got a cold and like everything went on hold for like over a week. And I was like, oh, well, that messed everything up.
Yeah.
Just realizing that there isn't necessarily somebody else to fall back on helps kind of keep me accountable, but just making sure that I'm showing up and doing the small things every single day is probably the biggest differentiator. Like, I don't have to be great at any one thing. It's just that being responsive to when someone asks me a question on email or whatever, showing up, delivering things on time when I say that I'm going to do it, like those are the biggest things. It's just making sure that you're holding yourself accountable to these little things day in and day out. And those are the building blocks for the much bigger steps.
That is great advice. Because, like, I mean, just to bring it back to email, that's the thing that we see over and over again is people have aspirations of doing it. You know, they have aspirations of building an audience. They have aspirations of communicating with them regularly. But consistency is the thing that is so hard. And once you miss 1 week, if you have a weekly newsletter, it's easier to miss the second week. And then it's easier to miss the third. And then it's easy to never do it again. Yeah. So that like diligence to just doing the thing you said you would do doesn't only help you now, but it helps you in the future by making it more difficult to stop, you know?
Yeah. And once you've done it 6 times, it's kind of embedded into your routine for the day or for the week. And it's much easier for you to just go in and knock it out and be like, oh, well, or for me, like I just get that guilt that I haven't done it yet. So it's like, I really need to go and do that thing. Like, even if it's like 9 o'clock at night, which I'm a morning person, so 9 o'clock at night is bedtime for me. Like, I'll write a note and I'll make sure that I do it the next day. So it's just like making sure that I'm staying on top of just, honestly, it's the little things. Yeah. That is what differentiates people who are good and people who are great.
Yeah, I agree with you. One of my mentors gave me a piece of advice that I still like use to this day. He was like, when you start your day, write the 3 things max that have to get accomplished that day on a post-it note, a piece of physical media that's going to sit in front of you the entire day. I sit at my desk a lot, so it worked for me. And he was like, you can't go above 3. So if something new goes on that list, one of those items has to come off and either needs to get done or it needs to be deprioritized. And then that thing sits in front of me every day and I have my 3 items. And you're right. There is this, like, I view it as a good pressure to finish those things. If they were important enough to make it to the list, they need to get done. And if something more important comes up, then I need to rationalize with myself and say, well, then one of these other things has to be less important.
Well, not only that, right? So I do something very similar. I do my top 2. So I have 2 items every day that it's like, okay, these are the priorities for me to do. If one of those things gets bumped and it is impacting somebody else, it's on you to communicate why it's changed and like when the new delivery date is. Right? And it's super simple. People only get upset when you don't communicate. It's such an easy thing to like overlook, be like, oh, I'm busy, I can't do it. But like, if you look at some of the top performers in the world, like if you text them, they text you right back. Like, because if they don't do it right then, it'll never get done. And that's not how they operate.
Yes. Yeah. That is very cool.
So let's try to get back into some questions.
Sorry about that. That was really interesting, man.
No, this is a great conversation, honestly. Like, this is why I love to have these calls, is because it leads you down paths of self-discovery or discovery of what makes other people tick. And really, that's kind of what this thing evolved from, is that I was reaching out to agency owners when I wasn't really sure what my path forward looked like. And I was like, what stories or lessons can I learn from them that I need to learn about myself or that I don't want to fall into myself? And then I wasn't recording them. And I was like, I've got bigger stories to be able to share. Like, these people have incredible stories. I wonder if I can record them and start a podcast. And I have. I think that we're probably 60 episodes deep at this point in time. And it's been such an enlightening thing. It's been so much fun having these conversations. And it's really kind of actually helped me direct myself, my path in my agency
Hmm.
to move it in the direction that it is now.
That's awesome.
So we touched on design a little bit earlier. What are some of the biggest challenges when designing a product experience for a non-technical user?
Yeah, it is. I would say the biggest thing is there's this UX principle called Jacob's Law. And what it talks about is how when you're making a product, you should try and make it similar to the other products that your customers might use. So it might be another website, or it might be a desktop tool. If they use Excel a lot, you want to make the patterns that you use similar to the patterns that they are familiar with. And in the case of small business users, it's difficult for a couple of reasons. One is because there's a huge variety of the applications that they use and the patterns that those apps use. And not just the actual interface patterns, but the language they use. You can see that in email marketing itself, where different email marketing platforms have different words for the same thing. So we call a one-off point-in-time message that you would send, not an automated one, a broadcast. And some other platforms also call it a broadcast, but then other platforms call it a campaign, and other platforms call it a message. So we need to support people who have prior experiences with not only other interface patterns, but also other vocabularies. That's a big one. And then the other one is, we had talked about this a little bit, is not overwhelming people. Is so much power under the hood in AWeber that we have this tendency to want to expose all of it. But like we mentioned, all that does is slow people down and stop them. So reining ourselves in is a big part of one of the challenges of designing for small businesses, because the core pattern there is oftentimes folks don't know what to do. Like, they know they should be doing email marketing, but they don't know what that looks like. And one of our biggest challenges is, how do we understand who someone is as quickly as possible so we can point them in the right direction and not require them to do this self-discovery? And that's actually way more challenging than you might think, because you might think, well, just ask them a bunch of questions when they sign up. Like, basically every platform does that. But there are only so many questions you can ask before folks churn from or you lose people from your onboarding survey. So figuring out, how do we get the answers that we need from the onboarding survey, pair that with what we can learn about someone from their website, and then pair that with what we can learn about someone from the behavior they perform early on to build out a profile that is actually useful. It's really challenging, really fun too, though. And it's something we iterate.
Yeah. Sorry. How do you overcome, when you're seeing a pattern that you've identified of someone who's likely to churn early on? How do you at AWeber overcome that, or as an organization ensure that their onboarding is completed and that they actually stick around for the long term?
So we do it a couple of different ways. One is we have a fantastic customer solutions team, and we do some manual intervention, just reaching out to people. The product team does that as well. When we see people who are experiencing a lot of friction, we'll reach out to them and just try and understand what's going on so we can improve it. And actually, I said that like it was one of multiple things we do, but that's the main thing that we do, is when we see friction, when we see someone who is likely to churn, we try and understand, not just for that one user, but in the scope of our product at large, is something happening that's keeping people from being able to accomplish their goals? Not just the individual, but anyone who goes through a similar flow. Because we're a do-it-yourself SaaS company, so people sign up on their own most of the time. We do some custom migrations for larger users, but most people who sign up for AWeber just sign up on their own, set up their own account, and never talk to a member of our team. So it's really important that we're proactively looking for these issues, reaching out to our customers and trying to talk to them about what's going on. Because I'm a big believer in data, like fully rounded data. Oftentimes when we talk about data, we're just talking about quant, the numeric side, where we're looking for charts and graphs, which is really helpful, but it's not the full story. So the charts and graphs help us understand where people are experiencing friction, like what is broken. But they don't help us understand the why in many cases. And the qualitative feedback of actually talking to someone, understanding their business, their mindset, hearing the words they use, that really helps us understand why and makes it easier for us to reduce friction. So we do that in a number of ways. Like we've given lots of people starter templates. So when you first sign up for AWeber, you have a welcome message automation already created for you that is generic enough that you could just turn it on if you want to, and it wouldn't necessarily clash with most businesses. Now, we obviously would recommend that most people go in and customize that thing to talk about your specific products, but having that template there dramatically increased the number of people who were activating those automated campaigns because they had something to start from and didn't have to learn the whole campaign creation flow from beginning to end.
So let me ask you this. As a self-serve SaaS organization,
Mm-hmm.
do you think having to manually reach out to customers to figure out where their pain points are kind of as a failure in the platform?
Yes, but I'd say every platform has failures. And like the reason we do that is so we can fix the failures. So I think it's acknowledging failure in a platform and attempting to fix it. And not every fix is a new feature. Some fixes are just better education. We over the last year actually we added an entirely new pattern for contextually relevant help on every page. So now instead of having to manually audit each page and set up help tooltips and cards and stuff wherever we think people should be interacting with help, we have this thing that automatically includes video content that's relevant to the page, knowledge-based articles that are relevant to the page, and also specific help for individual fields. So yeah, that's a really good question because yeah, when you think about it, reaching out to people is an acknowledgement of failure. But I think that's part of building a product that eventually works, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a failure in the fact that it's not something that can't be overcome. It's just that you need additional feedback in a certain point in time from a user set when you're seeing friction on the platform.
Yes.
You know, it's not a bad failure. It's not a good failure. It's just where you need additional feedback.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I like it popped into my mind as like a self-serve organization. Like if you're having to reach out to customers on, hey, I noticed you were stuck here. You know, what can we help you with? Does kind of acknowledge that there's a breakdown in the user's knowledge base and the actual platform and the ease of usability.
Yeah. I mean, so I will say like this is a case by case type of thing because the vast majority of people who sign up are able to get up. We have a number of activation metrics that we track, you know, people sending their first broadcast message, people activating a campaign, people publishing a landing page, creating a sign up form, things like that, importing subscribers. And most customers can do that without any sort of manual intervention. But what we're looking for is in the instances when somebody can't, how do we find those specific instances? Is it a type of person who's having trouble for some specific reason? Is it a type of technology? Is the mobile experience broken on a certain device or for all people trying to use a phone? And when I say broken, I mean not as efficient as it could be. And really trying to understand these pockets where folks aren't able to see success and fix them because we want everybody who actually is trying to build a business has the intent to use AWeber to be able to use it successfully.
Yeah, no, I love that. So, Chris, you've been a fantastic guest. At the end of each one of my episodes, I give all of my guests 90 seconds to kind of pitch anything that they're passionate about. So this could be AWeber, this could be anything else. So without further ado, the next 90 seconds are yours.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And I'm going to pitch AWeber and specifically the newsletter assistant, the agentic product. If you're a small business owner, if you're even mid to large business owner, and you can't consistently send email because of lack of expertise, because of lack of time, this thing is going to help you. Like, there's a lot of AI hype. I was skeptical of a lot of AI hype, but I've seen, again, thousands of people use this and go from not sending regularly to sending consistently. And I'll share this as the one big proof point. Looking at the previous time from creating a draft to actually sending that message, it was over an hour of prep, of people setting up their message, setting up their settings. Now it's 8 minutes. The median time is 8 minutes with the assistant. So that is real time saved. In some cases, multiple hours. In many cases, a half an hour, 45 minutes. But that adds up, and it's time back in your life. So you can try that at AWeber.com. You can sign up for free, or you can go to AWeber.com/assistant to play around with the newsletter assistant.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Brian. It was a real pleasure.